Hello and welcome back to the Demis Hellen channel. We're going to take a look at chaining up some effects and just show you my workflow of chaining those up, but with a difference. We're going to actually use the Kilohearts plugins, but inside another plugin to create the effects chain. And we can do this across bands, we can do this in pre and post, so that means we can chain them up in a very different and unique way as opposed to just using your DAW's mixer. And the plugin in question is Multipass from Kilohearts. So let's jump into the video. Let's look at what this can do for you. See if it's something that you'd like to add into your workflow. If you do enjoy the video, please consider subscribing. And if you have any questions about what you see in the video today, let me know down in the comments. So here is Multipass, and I'm not going to do a demo walkthrough on this, but we are going to look at the pre-effects, we're going to look at the band effects, and we're going to look at the post effects here as well. And you may have guessed it, this middle section is the Powerhouse. Now, any plugin that you can get from Kilohearts, which is here, and I just want to say I am not affiliated, I'm not being paid, this is all purchased off my own back. But Kilohearts, if you are watching this video, it'd be great to work with you at some point. So as I was saying, you can turn any of these effects in this list into a multiband effect. So instead of just having multiband compression, for example, which you may be very familiar with, we can have a multiband phaser, we could have a multiband limiter, multiband reverb. You get the picture, we can have anything multiband, or we can mix things up like I've done here. So this is not a product walkthrough, like I said, but what we are going to look at is how to use this section here, and we may touch on the modulators down at the bottom as well. Okay, so to the actual sound design, let's have a listen to what we've got here as a full looped region, and then I'll turn off multipass on this section so you can hear exactly what I'm doing with it. We'll do this soloed as well. You can see I've used this as an Atmos layer, so we actually have the synths already playing their main sections down here, and this is providing some extra Atmos but using an actual lead track as well. So soloing this again, let's open up Multipass. We can see in this one we've got no pre-effects, but we have the sections here and here. The reason there's no pre-effects and there's sort of more, I would say a limited amount here on this right hand side, is because we've already got an effects chain in place for this particular sound. And as you can see from this middle section, we have bands that are split up and denoted by these lines here. And we can see anything from here downwards is affected by this band, 465 Hz downwards. Then we have 465 Hz to 4.1 kilohertz. So that is our maximum range from that line to that line. And then this final band is from 4.1 upwards. And you can see that I've used a variety of different things on different channels. And you're probably going to be wondering why I've made those choices. And that's why this video exists. So the first one is the 3-band EQ, and I'm just taming the lows out of there. So if we disable this as it's playing, it's just removing some of the lows, not trying to remove them entirely, because I did that with the Pro Q3 that comes after Multipass. That's just purely to control the low information. The second one is actually doing a lot more. We're using the Haas effect and we're using a phaser. So the Haas effect, for those that are not familiar, makes things sound a little bit wider by using delay on left or right channel. So you can see I've put a little bit of delay there, 1.4 or 1.04 milliseconds, just to give it a bit of width. It just sinks back into the middle a little bit. It's a very subtle effect, but it does do wonders for your sound. And then I've used a phaser on this as well. So if we just turn the phaser off and turn it on whilst it's playing. What it's doing is moving the sound around in our stereo field and just shifting things around to give it some movement and more interest as an atmosphere layer. So without that layer on, we can control that mid section that I wanted to control in a very unique way. So we don't get too much power and body out of it, but we get more presence out of it. And then finally, this top layer has got a flanger on, and the reason for this was to control the highs. So they weren't really tinny, but it still had presence in that higher section. And you can see that it just helps to increase that stereo image a little bit as well as adding movement. You can see this section is fairly simple in these terms. I'll show you another multipass effect somewhere in this track where we've used this more heavily and less in the effects chain. But we're going to look at the post effects first, and we've got some reverb, a filter and some dynamics on there. So the reverb is to give it some space and obviously make it a bit more atmospheric. The filter is filtering out the low portion of the sound, so we're not getting it too cloggy and muddy. And then the dynamics is really just to control the dynamics as it says, but bring out some more of these effects and the reverb and everything else. The reverb is just a simple 5.6 seconds, a little bit of a bigger size, a little bit of extra width and mix to taste. The filter to take out some of the mud, and then the dynamics to add a little bit of control to the sound and just bring out some of the parts that I want to be more present. You can see after that dynamics, I should put another filter or an EQ after just to control those lows again, because we all know the compressor will pull out more of that low detail again and add it back in. So that's why the Pro Q3 is there, just to kind of tidy up the multipass after, so I can just do it in one clean sweep. So from that, you can see Multipass is a very creative tool, and you can do some really wacky ideas in there, or you can save effects chains as well if you so wish to do so. And now I'm going to show you a different instance of Multipass where it's been more of the workhorse to shape this sound and put it into the mix as an atmosphere layer. So let's listen to how this sounds, and then I'll turn on Multipass. You can see I've destroyed that sound into what you can hear now, which is very quiet in the mix, but it's intended to be quiet. And for context, I'll play the entire section here that is looped with Multipass off, and then I'll turn it on the second sequence. So you can argue that you can't hear it, but it is adding to the atmosphere layers. It's about building these elements to generate textures and give the track a real sense of purpose and position. And this is all done in Multipass. There is a pitch shifter after this, but it's not actually switched on because I decided to put it into the actual effects chain here in Multipass. And upon opening Multipass, we can see we have a lot more going on, and I've saved this as a preset called Trance Atmos. And the pitch shift has been put here into the pre-effects, so then the rest of the chain makes more sense when we're shaping the sound. Then we've got some multi-effects, again just 3 bands, and this is how it comes default. And then in the post effects, we've got a trance gate, we've got a reverb, a delay and a filter. And what we haven't looked at is we've got 2 LFO modules loaded here at the bottom. So we're not going to go into great detail on these, but they do exactly what you'd expect them to do. So let's start with pitch shifting. And the reason that it's been pitch shifted -15 is to bring it into the key of the track to start with. But also I've pitch shifted it that little bit further. I think it was -3, So if you imagine this was actually -12, that's 1 octave below, but it was actually -3 to start with to put it into key of the track. So that leaves us with -15. And it's really to create an air in the mix and just create a little bit of movement, especially with those sort of like wind effects that happen at the beginning and the end of that sample. We're taming all those high frequencies and really bringing them down. And then from there, we go through these 3 filters here on all of the bands. So it's kind of split into how it is default. And I've used one to cut the lows out, obviously in this section in the lows. I've cut out a problem frequency that was in that mid section. So I've just used a notch filter. And then I've tamed the highs here to make sure it's not too tinny and sort of taking away the edge from the rest of the track. And in addition to this, I've used the Haas effect again to just widen up that middle band so it takes the energy out of the sound and makes sure that it's more floaty in the background. Then the real magic happens here in the post effects again, coupled with the modulators. So we've got a trance gate using 16th notes, and it's just the first preset I think it comes with, and that's what I used on a 32 speed, so that's the resolution. Usually it'd be like this. So I wanted to add some more movement into it. So instead of just using a flange or a phaser, for example, I've started using the trance gate for movement and just softening it up by having a bit of a slower attack on there and using a modulator to control the mix. So we'll look at the modulator in a second. We'll look at the rest of these effects first, and then I'll show you what I've done with those. So reverb, again, sort of a sizable decay on there, 6.4 seconds, a bigger size. We've used a lot of dampening in this one, bit of extra width, and then mix is just over the 50% mark to sort of push it into the background of the track. Then just a little bit of delay, really just to neaten up the edges to stop things sounding a bit clicky here and there where it's a little bit abrupt, especially with that gator on above. And then finally a filter just to roll out the lows that everything's been brought back in from this processing, just to stop it getting muddy and getting in the way of the rest of the track. So without the post effects, sounds pretty nasty, especially with the pitch shifting, the sample's not taking it too well. But with everything added on, it suddenly becomes quite an acceptable piece to add into the track. And where the rest of the magic happens for this particular sound is down here in the modulators. So we've got 2 LFOs. We've got one on a ping pong sync mode, so it's kind of bouncing back and forth at the desired hertz rate. And then we've got one here that is on a unicycle, so it is just operating in one direction, but also on a looped sync mode as well. And this is actually in sync mode rather than free mode. And what these are doing is controlling parameters. So just a quick demonstration. If I click this plus button here, all these plus buttons appear everywhere, and we can click on one and attach that parameter, that LFO in this case, to any of these parameters that are highlighted. And because this is attached to the mix and the fact that I've put it into a sync mode, it's giving you the full effect of the trance gate, but then it's slowly decreasing the effect by turning the mix down. But because it's pulsing at a fairly fast rate, it's just taking off the edge of having a solid trance gate on there. So if I go in and turn this off or just bypass for a second, you'll hear exactly how this sounds. Turn the mix up here. Quite choppy, but I didn't want it to be too choppy, but I wanted to hear movement and just take the edge off it being smooth. You can see I've had it set to the sort of 20% region, and then when this is added, it's almost like you've got sidechain on there performing a little bit of pumping, but obviously on the beats rather than off the beats. And then the other LFO that's just ping-ponging back and forth is actually attached to the pan here on this middle band. And that's just giving a little bit of movement. So instead of putting a phaser or a flange on there or anything like that, we're using this to modulate the pan. So there we are. Hopefully that has opened up your eyes to the power of the Kilohearts collection, especially the fact that you can put it into Multipass and that they have so many in their collection as well. I've got it set up so I have the Kilohearts stuff all in one folder here, and you can see the amount of effects that we have available. If you want to see more videos with the Kilohearts plugins, let me know. That would be interesting to hear if you want to see more videos with that. If you did think the video was worth a subscription, it'd be great to have you on board and see you around in the community. And with that said, thank you very much for watching. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.